This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm joined by Mark West. He is the Libertarian candidate for Arkansas governor. Good to have you back with us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
How's it been going out there on the campaign trail?
It's a tough, busy slog.
It's 100 degrees outside, Mark. So.
It's a sweaty slog at that. You feel like a slug.
Yeah, well, but you're making the rounds.
Yes, yes,
we are. Folks. Let's talk about some big news items and get your take on how things are going on some things. Obviously, one of the most dominant business issues that we're seeing right now, and something that's impacting Arkansas in a major way, are the trade and tariff battles that we're seeing at the federal level and the international level, but having a huge impact on Arkansas. I guess if you were Arkansas governor, what would be your position on this, or what would you be saying to the federal government? What would you be trying to do and make a change to?
Well, the unfortunate thing is we have this process where the governor is in the same party as the president, and they're really hesitant to criticize within the party like that. But the Arkansas governor has a role to stand up for the state of Arkansas, and right here this isn't happening. You know, the governor shouldn't be looking for the government to give another handout to farmers when it shouldn't have been a situation where farmers were going to need the handout. You know, it's why start something that you're going to eventually have to stop? The whole tariff war is just nonsense. It's just it's a way of playing games with people's lives when you don't really have to. Mm-hmm. You're making a big bet that somehow this is going to come out your way, and as we all know, you know, gambling isn't a guarantee. And these tariffs are a big guarantee, and it's gambling with the livelihoods of a lot of Arkansans.
You're out on the campaign trail. You're talking to some farmers, obviously, if you're hitting the streets and the rural back roads there. Is it changing their opinion of the administration? Is it changing their attitude towards trade in general?
Well, I know
or is it just apprehension and fear at this point in time?
I think there's just really more a caution, more apprehension is a good word. It's just more this general, they're not sure what this is going to lead toward. You know, they're concerned that you're going to wind up with price drops that are going to, you know, impact their ability to hit a bottom line, that you might have some cost increases for the general consumer. And all in all, it would wind up in the long run being a negative on their communities. Now, most farmers that I talk to are kind of resilient. They're family farms, and you know, they look at it as, we've built this farm, we've always kept it running. You know, we've always taken care of people, we've taken care of, you know, this deal, and they really want the freedom to be able to negotiate and pursue whatever market they want. They don't really like the idea of, you know, being channeled or being told, well, you're not trading here, you'll trade here, because that always impacts the price. They're not able to get out and negotiate for that best price.
Right.
So they really would just prefer the government just kind of get out of it and let the free market do what it's going to do, because they tend to be more prosperous when they have that freedom.
But there's always been some government interface with some of that. But I think that part of the deal to me too is, and I've said this publicly a couple times, is just there hasn't been a game plan on any of this. It just kind of seems like it's been a shoot from the hip strategy. No one's talked about, here's how we're going to conduct this business, and here's how we're going to, here's what we hope to see when it ends. It's just been kind of raw, pure negotiations on the president's part, but I'm not sure there's a plan on paper anywhere that says here's where it pushes us too far, here's where it doesn't push us too far. I think that's what leads to it. Let's shift gears and talk about another issue. You've rolled out a new position on skills trade reform that you have talked about. I guess we've had this debate at the state level before, but I want to hear what you're proposing if you're governor in terms of how to do workforce training.
Right. Right now we're focusing on what I would consider day one priorities, things that I want to begin when elected governor. And one of those priorities is trying to make our business community and our industrial community more open, more free, more available to the average individual. And part of that is going to be getting rid of the cumbersome government boards, state-run boards. I think that there's especially if you look at the technological community, you see a lot of these free market solutions, peer-based boards, peer-based committees that are actually a lot less expensive, but do a better job of actually ferreting out the bad people in the industry. And what we want to do is allow this to be on the free market, so that you have a group of electricians that are a group of peers, and they're, these are what the electrical standards should be. This is what should be met. And they're able to look at other electricians on a peer-to-peer basis, rather than having this kind of overhanded, more bureaucratic approach that really costs more in the long run. And, because every agent that we have to have in the state, you have to have money in the budget to pay for that agent. So why do we continue to think that if something is important and it's good, the only way to do it is for the state to do it? As a libertarian, I come from the exact opposite idea, that if something's a good idea, then somebody is going to provide that in the market if you open that opportunity.
So instead of having an engineers board or a medical board that oversees engineers or doctors, you're saying it should be a peer-to-peer oversight?
Right, it'd be more of a peer-to-peer oversight board. It's not saying that some of these things aren't important, because some of them are. We want to make sure that our doctors are doing what doctors should do, and that
electricians follow certain standards,
and attorneys follow certain standards. But I believe that can be handled in the free market. You don't have to do it as a state government, and that's one way that you can help cut the budget, cut the cost to the taxpayer, and eventually turn that back in tax cuts.
How much money do you think that would save?
I don't know. I'd have to crunch those numbers.
I got you.
But in the long run, it will save money for the state.
This has been debated before in the state legislature. In the last session, it did not move too far, because there were a lot of examples that were easily brought up to say, what if? And there could be some pretty negative outcomes if there is not some sort of regulation in a heavy-handed sense of offering penalties for people that don't comply with certain standards. There is a red tape bureaucracy task force that is working to find ways to cut some of this red tape, though. Are you familiar with what they have been working their way through, and does that fit into what you're talking about?
That would fit in, and that's kind of what I've talked about from the beginning as another day one priority is the Committee on Spending and Taxation. This idea of looking at what we're spending money on the government level, and what areas we can cut, what areas we can combine, because we do have some departments that actually have overlap, and it creates redundancy, so we're paying twice for the same thing just because the state's doing it. And that would figure into what we're looking to do. And we understand, there is that concern, that well, this guy could be off, over here practicing medicine and harming people.
Right.
So in the process, we would have to transition. You would have to transition from the state running it to it being a more peer-based free market solution. You wouldn't just be able to say, okay, we're cutting them all out today and they're gone. Free market, do whatever.
Sure.
There would have to be a transition. You may even have some of the same players in the free market that you would have on the state level. And of course, that board would be able to, because your reputation is everything in a lot of these businesses. If you're a doctor and you get a bad reputation, you're going to have less customers. You're going to have less clients. If you're an electrician and you've burned a couple of houses down, your reputation is going to be impacted. You're going to have less clients. So we have this idea that somehow because the state does it, that nobody will ever be harmed by somebody doing wrong, and that's just a fallacy.
I would disagree with you
people
on
still
that,
get
though.
hurt.
I mean, and then they do get punished as a result of that. Their licenses get revoked, and
but they would also have a licensure form on the free market in a peer-to-peer system as well that could also be revoked for the same thing. They would still have these powers in the board, and that's the point of having a peer-to-peer thing, is they're saying, hey, we know this guy's doing bad, we need to rip his license. And they can do that without having a state in the way to say this license is valid or this license isn't.
All right, let's shift to medical marijuana. We have seen the travails of the cultivation. Now we're moving to the dispensary application process here. The voters voted for medical marijuana in 2016.
Yes, they did.
We're in mid-2018 with no end in sight. As a matter of fact, I've heard some predictions that it would be mid-2019 at the earliest before it would be readily available for the more than 5,400 people who have gotten their cards for medical marijuana. Could be 2020 even. Why do you think Arkansas is struggling so much to get this off the ground?
Because the government's involved. The reason you had two measures on the ballot is one measure was a heavy-handed government approach, and the other approach was like, well, we don't really need the government so heavy-handed in the industry. Well, that one got struck. So the one that didn't have so much government involvement, it got struck. So we didn't really get to see the will of the people on that one. So now we're stuck with this one that has a very heavy-handed government approach, and we're seeing what happens when you leave stuff in heavy hands of government. It gets gummed up. It gets caught up in bureaucracy. It gets caught up in red tape. It gets caught up in the idea that the party in power should be the moral guide for the state, and somehow we need to decide, well, how can you have your medical marijuana? Well, you can't have it smoking it, or you can't have it this way or that way. And so it's basically like a delay, like they're trying to delay the process because right now Big Pharma is slowly catching up, and they're trying to they're trying to corner that industry. And right now the slowdown is just going to put, and here's the sad tragedy of it, there are people in pain every day that don't want to get hooked on opioids, that want their medical freedom, and our state stands in the way of them and their medical freedom. When it's already been voted by the voters that this is what we should have, it should be legal in Arkansas, and yet you still have the government through its bureaucracy, through its channels, through the state legislature, through the governor and his staff. They're making sure that this thing is being gummed up and that it's really
Do you think it's
struggling to get
intentional
through
on
the
their
works.
part? Because there's been legal challenges to this, and I mean, I haven't seen any intentional throwing a wrench in the machinations of government here. I've seen more legal challenges have been what has pushed the delay
Well,
and the process
that's
of
part
moving
of
things
it.
up and down
But
through the
when
court.
you have a board that is appointed, there's political process in that. And those people are appointed for certain reasons, whether it's money they've donated or whether it's time they've donated or whether it's their expertise in the field, whatever. So when you have politics involved in the process, you're going to have, and then you have delay, those politics might be part of that delay. You can't totally rule them out just because you have the legal side. I think that you've got both a political and a legal side to this process, and what's happening is people are being hurt. People that need this medicine are being hurt. You know, like the debate now is if you have a medical marijuana card, should you have to turn in your guns? You know, I mean, this is silly. It's
Where's
nonsense.
that debate? I haven't seen that debate.
Well, it's more national
I
debate,
gotcha.
but it's, these are questions that are being asked, and eventually they'll seep down. They always do. They always seep in. The politics always seep in. And we can't ever completely rule out the politics when you have something that's drugged almost 2 years being implemented. And as you're saying, it may be another year, maybe another 2 years before it's finally implemented and people get the medicine that's been voted for.
Last question for you. We've seen Arkansas Works has kind of flipped the switch on this work requirement to be able to qualify for receiving the Medicaid expansion health care that is out there. If you were governor, what would your approach to Arkansas Works be?
Well, it would have to be on multiple levels, because one thing I do believe is that the people in our state are charitable. We have a very charitable state. We have a very compassionate state. Otherwise, we wouldn't have programs like that. You wouldn't see poverty programs across the state. But what I would like to do as governor is, number one, I would like to begin empowering those local poverty programs to begin helping with these bills, whether it's through better tax incentives for these charitable organizations, or not even charitable, just somebody that runs a business that wants to help, or maybe it's a doctor that wants to donate time, nurses that want to donate time, pharmaceutical company or drugstores that want to donate prescription drugs, at lower cost or whatever. Create tax incentives so that you can begin mitigating the cost on the local level, so you can get more people involved on the local level, because really the way that you're going to handle poverty is dealing with it in community after community after community. You're not going to find a statewide approach that you're going to be able to push out of Little Rock that's going to solve that problem. It's going to take communities working together to solve the problem, and I believe tax incentives will help start that process for them. And then I would like to see us repeal out of it, because one of the aspects that I see with Arkansas Works is the potential for it to be abused as just kind of a corporate subsidy, where corporations will keep employees working, just enough to qualify for it. So you have somebody that's working a full-time job, or they're working, not necessarily full-time, they can only get part-time, but they're working just enough that they can still qualify for that and still qualify for food stamps, and they're still not really getting anywhere. So we need to come up with a way in the community to help them, and that's where the other part comes in, is I want to see businesses begin partnering with these charitable organizations and these groups on the local communities that are trying to help people that are in poverty or that are just outside of poverty, help them get job skills. Because that's what you hear is there's a big skills gap problem.
Right.
That's creating that. I would love to be able to battle the cost part, but so much of the healthcare cost is because of federal stuff, and there's not much you can do with federal stuff on the state level. Now, what I would like to see is more doors and avenues opened up as far as being able to go across state lines and that type of thing for your health insurance. I think that might help some, but by and large, you've got to help people be able to afford health care, and engage in the community is one step of getting there.
Got to come up with a fancy title for this program, Mark. Arkansas Works. It's simple. You understand what it is. You got to come up with something. Arkansas Gives or something like that.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe we may look at that one.
All right. He's Mark West. He's a Libertarian candidate for Arkansas governor. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. That's all for today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.